So for the past month, I've been helping one of my B2B SaaS clients turn their messy and scattered marketing research into high converting copy. You know, the kind of copy that makes your ideal customers think, wow, they really get me. So if you're a B2B SaaS company, you might have collected ton of customer market research data, but probably you're in one of these situations. You got a folder full of GONG recordings you haven't touched in months. You got survey responses buried in Google Forms. You got support tickets with golden customer language that no one is actually looking at. And what about your analytics data? Just sitting there taking dust. And despite all this research, your website is still not converting like it should. Your copy feels disconnected from what your customers actually want. And every time you need to actually write something, you have to basically start from scratch. And that's why in this video, I'll show you exactly how to organize your research into 3 layers so you never feel overwhelmed again. Then I'll show you exactly what research to do next based on what you already have, so you never waste time on the wrong things. We'll also learn how to systematically connect the 3 types of research to actually understand the full story behind it. And finally, we'll go into how to build a repeatable research system that you can count on anytime to create consistent messaging that converts. But before we jump into the system, let's talk about why most B2B SaaS companies struggle with their research data. All right, so here's what typically happens, what I see happen with my clients when I start working with them. So what most companies do is either they randomly pull quotes from interviews or other research data whenever they need them. So pretty scattered approach. Or they might look at surface analytics without the actual context of the full picture. Another approach is they store research in scattered places, which means Google Documents, personal notes, Slack threads, it's a mess. Another way is that they treat each data source as a separate silo, right? So product might look at user testing, for example. Sales might rewatch some of their calls or adjust their decks based on their insights, but never look at what marketing does. Marketing, they might conduct some surveys or interviews, rare. In those cases where they conduct interviews, it's pretty rare. Or they might do it in a reactive way, so rather than a proactive way, without being able to spot any patterns. What is the result of all of this? The copy obviously doesn't convert. Any copy that they write, whether it's website copy, email, or sales collaterals, it's rare that it works if research is approached with these methodologies or ways. Messages don't resonate, so this is important even in conversations, right? Even at conferences, for example, something as simple as that. Lots of time is wasted, obviously, on looking for insights because everything is scattered and is messed up. There's confusion about what matters to your ICPs, to your customers, because with scattered research and confusing approaches to actually finding those insights, you never know where to look at for what. And decisions are based on gut feelings rather than actual data. So the way that I think about this, which is different from what most companies do and how they approach research, is to think of your research as an iceberg. What do I mean? Here's the iceberg. Research is the iceberg, and there are 3 layers of this iceberg. So the most visible ones, the most accessible ones, the ones that typically most companies do yes or no, but they could have access to, are the what they say layer. So this is the first one, surface layer, and the what they do. So what customers or prospects say and what customers or prospects do, which is the most visible, the most accessible. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by this. The third layer, which is the actual differentiator between companies who do research well and those who don't, and the companies who know their customers better than those who don't, is the kind of deep layer, which is the why they act. So understanding the reasons, the motivations, the desired outcomes behind what customers do and their buying behaviors. So what do we do about all this? What I created is this decision-making tree, let's call it. I call it research optimization system, which is basically the same exact process or system that I use whenever I jump into a new project. I have to figure out, okay, what does this company have? How do I fill in the gaps with my own research? How do I help them as well understand the whole research ecosystem of what they have and what they need to do to get to insights that actually help them write copy that converts and create a messaging strategy that works. We start the audit, and then, as I mentioned, we have the 3 layers, right? So surface layer, we have the structural layer, which is the second one, and the deep layer. So let's go through the decision-making tree. So in short, we start our, let's call it audit. First layer, do you have voice of customer data? So what users say. And the way that I divide every layer, again, another division, it's the 3 different kind of strata, let's say, of the layer. We have the internal research, the user research, and market research. So for this specific layer, the surface layer, internal research can look like support tickets and chats, sales call recordings, team interview transcripts, user research, which is basically the prospect customer side, could be customer reviews, NPS surveys, feature requests, and market research could be competitor analysis, competitor review mining, right? So looking at reviews for competitors. This is typically research that most companies already have or have access to, which is typically what I find. So this is the surface layer that tells you what users say. And I say users just to basically include both prospect and customer side. If you don't have this research, then the first step should be to extract support tickets, recall sales call, gather reviews, and analyze competitor messaging. So these are the first steps that you should take to actually get this layer in place so that you can move on to the next stage. What does this look like? So for example, here are some examples of things that I've done for clients. So this is my competitor research data. So the way that I divide it, it's usually we have a copy section with motivation, value, anxiety is the other one, where I basically collect copy from all our competitors' websites so that I can contrast them and look at them, understand their selling points, their claims, their promises, their messaging and language that they use to address their prospects. So we understand also what awareness and sophistication level we are entering into or what competitors are actually using. Second step for competitor research, I also look at design. So for me, it's also important to understand the emotional triggers, the message that's conveyed through the design, the navigation. So I also look at the UX side of things, especially when we do complete website rewrites or where we have to reinvent the architecture or the visual hierarchy. And then we also look at strategy. So based on all of these insights, what are our observations about positioning and messaging? So this is an example of competitor research analysis that you might have. Review mining, so looking at customer reviews. This is an example of what I would collect. So basically extracting pieces of reviews from G2, Capterra, those review websites, and dividing them by positive, negative category and tagging them for specific theme that then we can use, analyze, and do pretty cool things with. The next stage or layer, actually, once this has been completed, it's the structural layer, tracking behavior, what users do. It's something else that's pretty easy to get access. I would say 60-70% of the companies I work with typically already have some of these in place, especially the analytics and the heat maps. But there are other things. So if we divide it by internal research, user research, and market research, we have for internal feature usage data or error tracking. This is done with product analytics platforms. Then we have user research, which typically includes analytics, session recordings, heat maps, conversion funnels. So you could do a lot of this stuff with platforms like Hotjar, for example. And then market research, so competitor usability testing, market analytics benchmarks. This especially is something that I find really valuable, especially if you can do it with someone related to the target audience that can look at competitor websites and tell you what they think about the messaging, how they interact with the website. All really useful and cool stuff. If we don't have Some of these, what's the next steps? Probably install Hotjar, set up analytics, so GA4, Google Analytics 4, and start tracking these key pages because that's the data that you need to have. And some examples. Most of you are probably familiar with Google Analytics, very useful to understand conversion paths, to understand what devices users use on the website, for example, some basic demographics, conversion goals, time on page, bounce rate for some pages to understand which performs better or which performs worse. Then user recordings. This is just a quick screenshot from a recent client. So I typically sit down and watch at least 50, 60 recordings to spot patterns and understand what's going on. And then usability testing. Two of my favorite user testing platforms are Conversion Crimes and User Feel. Both can be used for different purposes. They are both great and their tester pool is pretty good. So again, you might want to test different version as well. So desktop, mobile, different versions, and contrast them. Some platforms give you the ability to actually extract clips that you can share with stakeholders. Very helpful things. Usability testing, it's something that I would say 5% of companies do. Very few companies use usability testing for messaging or to understand how users interact with their website, which is a shame. Next layer, once we've done all of this, it's the deep layer. So this is that part submerged in our iceberg that very few companies do or take the time to actually do well. So in this case, we have internal research team interviews, support team insights. For user research, we have customer interviews, very important, probably the most important. Win-loss analysis, cancellation surveys. For market research, competitor positioning analysis, which is basically a deeper version of our initial competitor analysis. Industry expert interviews, this optional, rarely do it, but could be helpful. If we don't have the majority of this data, what should we do? Schedule 3-5 customer interviews. That's the minimum. We try to always do at least 7 to 10 per segment if possible. Create journey maps. So understand what is the journey that they need to go through to actually convert and what are the journey paths that don't convert. And then if needed, also document win-loss. So win-loss cases, the accounts that you win, the accounts that you lose, and why especially. All of this research tells you why users act. And in this case, it's something you should probably do regularly, right? So these are some examples. I use Fathom, this platform here, Fathom, to record all my calls, write notes, take transcripts, and then I analyze all of this data. So this is an example of a customer interview or team interview with multiple participants. This is a customer interview. Then again, we extract all of our insights here, transcripts. These are notes, for example, extracted from Fathom. So meeting purpose, key takeaways, topics. Pretty helpful to skim through. Next stage. So we basically covered all our 3 layers, right? So what is the next stage? The next stage is to analyze everything and ask ourselves, can we make sense of all this data now that we have everything? So by this stage, after going through all the layers, we should be able to explain how customer discover you, why they decide to try you, what convinces them to buy, when and why they choose competitors, what keeps them as customers, and why some leave, right? So all of these are questions that you should be able to answer by the time you get to this point. If you can't, then in this case, you could just send me a DM. I'll send you my audit template and checklist. You could check out some of my free content or any free content that's online, and it's probably going to help you. Or you could book a strategy call and we could walk through all of it together. I could tell you if I can help you or point you in the right direction. If you know all of this stuff and you can understand the whole landscape, you have the right research, then it's time to collect all of the insights. I usually create a research and insights report and then distill that into a messaging framework that basically tells you how you speak and how you communicate the right insights for the right people so that your positioning is clear, your differentiators are clear, you can speak in the right voice and tone. So some examples of how we do this is the first page of our messaging framework, where we go into market category, frame of preference. We have a messaging hierarchy that basically tells you how do we mix the benefits, features, differentiators, what's the split ideally that we should follow for this framework. Then we have the strategic narrative. So understanding the landscape in the industry. This is basically your point of view adapted towards the customers that you're speaking to. So what is wrong in the industry? What's the solution? What are your competitors doing wrong? What are your customers doing wrong? So understanding all the different facets and nuances to be able to enter the conversation in a way that attracts attention and increases curiosity for prospects, and you can start the sales argument, basically. Then we have the key messaging pillars, right? So how do we differentiate? What are the 3-4 differentiated value themes that we can use in our messaging? Then brand voice chart. So what are the characteristics of our brand voice? What should we do in our copy? What we shouldn't do, and so on. Then we also have value proposition canvas. So we basically go for each persona. We have a sheet like this, where we move from the top 6-7 problems into their implications, the solution for each, what the benefits are, so what's in it for our specific persona, for that specific pain, jobs to be done, and examples of value proposition copy that we can use, adapt, change, reshape. Very helpful. Finally, in this case, we also need to train the team on using the framework, right? So that's why I always include guides on how to use all of the documents that I share with my clients. So both for the messaging framework, but also for the value proposition canvas, because I want my clients to be able to install these processes and systems into their own company, but also then put them into practice, right, regularly. So this is very important. Once this is all done, you basically have a pretty good system for understanding the research data that you have and put it into practice. But then we also need to keep it fresh, right? So anytime there are major market changes, new competitors popping up, you might pivot your product or change direction or introduce a new feature that kind of influences the market. Or I recommend at least 6 months or once a year. I always recommend to revisit the whole system. And basically once this is done, you would go back to the top and start your audit again. Do you have the first layer? Do you have the second layer? So do you understand what users say, what they do, and why they act? And this pretty much concludes our overview of the research optimization system. All right, so I've shown you the research optimization system and how to make decisions and prioritize the different research activities. But in order to make it work, you need a couple of things. First, you need a systematic process for organizing all that research across the 3 layers. Second, you need templates for extracting all of those insights from the different data sources. Third, you need clear documentation methods so insights don't get lost. And finally, you need regular audits or systems to make sure that everything stays current. It's a lot, but when you take time to do it right, you'll first start seeing higher conversion rate because your copy matches what your customers actually are thinking about and want. Then you'll start seeing shorter sales cycles because you're actually addressing real buying concerns. You get better customer retention because you're setting the right expectations. And most importantly, you'll never again sit down to write copy and wonder, what should I say? And if you're struggling to implement this or want my exact templates, just DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn or find me on my website, and I'll send you my audit checklist that walks you through the whole process.